Friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are, part 2 in a little mini-series with Andy Clemson from Calibrate Learning and Calibrate Technology. Now, we just did one, hopefully people have listened to it, Andy. That's why you're here, my friend.
Exactly.
But hopefully they've listened to it, which is all about how you started, etc. But now this one, I'd like to ask you, what solutions does Calibrate actually offer? And what are your core products, or what you would suggest as being service specialist areas that you like to deal with companies?
Well, the first one, Chris, I would say all focused around clarity and the definition of what is a role expectation in opposition to traditionally a job description.
Nice one, yep.
So after that becomes, if you've put that line in the sand that I've mentioned before, it's then how you start to assess the competence as that start point, because it will vary massively from one individual to the next.
Yeah, and I'm assuming from what you said, or what you're talking about now, is once you look at the clarity of what's expected, and then you look at the competence requirements, you then offer what the critical role expectations should be for an organisation in conjunction with that management team, so that they actually acknowledge that is, or they are, the best critical role expectations, instead of just a list of points on a job description.
Correct. The client's engaged from the start based on the need of that specific organisation. Clearly in aviation, all of it is around safety.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But ultimately, yes, that is the start point. And from there then, that is where the tech comes into its own in the platform and starts to cement that across the board and across the hierarchy from start to finish.
Okay, good. So now we're almost doing a sequence of activities. So what would come next, Andy?
So after that, there would be a rollout in terms of a communique to the employees, wherever they are in the hierarchy, in terms of what that actually means. Because we do know, in comparison to some of the companies we're working for outside of aviation, is there is an element of skepticism if people have got to expose or disclose any potential weaknesses, because it's the self-assessment that you have seen that comes next.
Okay.
And can be quite challenging.
Yeah, it is. Now that self-assessment, the like you said, the communication, the engagement, and the endorsement by the senior leadership team, has to be so genuine and sincere, doesn't it?
Correct.
Because there is an inbred skepticism from people that if I say I've got weaknesses, I'll be seen as negative.
Yeah.
Whereas what you actually do is you convert that self-assessment into a strength.
Correct. And it's that mindset of the focus on people and the focus on support, not just a traditional tell and expect.
Yep.
Because if you're trying to do that, then you still haven't assessed what the competency is in terms of someone's ability to do that. So if you can get into the mindset that, yes, I'm happy now to self-assess through the platform and actually say I can do or I can't do this in terms of various forms of that, then you get a much better picture of where we're at. But equally, that can pose some challenges.
Yep. And what I've seen, Andy, is in a really good environment, if you give the person the opportunity to say, look, I don't really understand that properly, or I've never been shown that, or I'd really like to do better at that.
Yeah.
If you have such a positive environment, and it's controlled, obviously, you almost see people go, and then when they see that the support is genuine, you see their shoulders come out, their chest come out, and they start to enjoy it. And if you can make people want to learn and learn together with the levels within the hierarchy, then people win together.
Yeah. Well, for many, Chris, it's the first time that often a lot will have had individual focus when there's someone actually interested in them. Yeah. And again, why wouldn't you as a manager want to be interested in your people? Because these are the people responsible for your safety in terms of results. Yeah. So it has had the right response where the intervention is appropriate. And it's that definitive word demonstrating support, not the risk of chastisement if someone discloses something that they can't actually do. Yeah. So it's a big part of it.
And it's amazing, Andy. And like I said, I mean, you just got to look at me. I've been in this business for a long time.
Really?
Yeah, really. They're not lines of wisdom. But sometimes it's so frustrating to see, and what I call the PAT principle, the person at the top, can say all the right things, can present all the right things,
Yeah.
And then you see them at conferences and on panels, and we do this, but they don't. It's not genuine.
Yeah.
But their people know that.
Yeah.
And when you see somebody that might not be as intellectually gifted or might not be as technically gifted,
Yeah.
but they've got a good heart and sincere, willingness to make people better, people love to work for people like that.
Yeah, totally agree, Chris. You've heard me say many times that, no one honestly comes to work planning to have an accident or to actually generally make errors. They happen. So the question that we have to ask is why?
Yeah.
And that drives us back to that competency element, which is why you've got to assess where people are actually at.
Yeah.
And then you can do something about it.
Yeah. And I also love the approach that you guys, I've sat in on some and I've seen, because we've had common clients. But what I do love as well is the fact that you've got a genuine desire to make people better.
Yep.
And when you see in somebody's eyes, or the way they perform, or the way they then speak, when they realise that they're better than they thought they could be, or better than they thought somebody would allow them to be, that's such a lovely thing to be part of. And I think as people get older in an industry and everybody comes to the end of their career and stuff, if you're able to pass on a bit of wisdom without sounding as if you know better, and letting the younger generations have that energy, enthusiasm, and just everything is possible, if you then give them a little few tips or pointers, that helps them speed up their process.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about what you do, Andy.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it as we have. I mean, how many people out there that at the moment are capable of so much more?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, if they were looking at the next level, at the moment, they'll only have to look at how some of their colleagues, let's say it's their supervisor or a DM, is treated.
Yeah.
And for a lot, that's enough to say, actually, I don't want anywhere part of that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about, defining the role expectation, the one thing we haven't mentioned, for example, is it should also include behaviour and attitude.
Yeah.
So
not
values,
not just task outcome oriented. Yeah.
Now, a lot of company values, and I've seen this in aviation over the years, is everyone has values. But even often if you go to more senior levels, there's no understanding or appreciation of what that is. And it's certainly not lived. Yet it's on the website, it's in a training room, it's on mugs, it's wherever you look.
Yeah.
But it's just words, Chris.
Yeah.
So the platform, as part of that focus on clarity and competence, starts now to actually build in those two critical components.
Yeah. It's like the wallpaper test.
Yeah.
Somebody showed me that in the States once. They were a trainer. And what he said we put frames up of wallpaper in different parts of the business. And he said people walk around it all the time. He said when you ask them what wallpaper was up, some of them don't even know there was wallpaper up.
Yeah.
Some do. They don't know whether it's stripes, circles or flowers.
Yeah.
And it's the same. If your values, mission and various other posters are up all over the place because it says so in an accreditation or a regulatory guideline, but the employees don't know what it means or they don't live by it, and the managers can't even give you the interpretation, then it's futile. It's just decoration.
It's how you
shame, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's how you translate those words into actions. Yeah. And one of your big passions is feet on ground or fog. Yeah. And that's what it's about. But to do that, you've got to understand it.
Yeah.
And then you've got to align it to those expectations.
Yeah.
So when we talk about that first stage, expectations, that is for everyone in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Because, as you know, there's different levels of responsibility and accountability, and they need to be defined. Yeah. So as everyone has clarity in terms of how do we support the people that generate the biggest income for the organisation? Yeah.
And I remember going back to your colleague with the military background. I remember again getting some feedback. So I asked a question, and one of the things that was being covered was the amount of people that get pushed extra work or relied upon because the management know they can do it.
Yeah.
And then the level and the effect it has on them because they get overworked, they get burnt out, they're frustrated that management won't address the ones who should be doing it.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, the ones who should be doing it would do it if they knew how to do it on a similar basis. So it's like a negative cycle that if you don't get out of it, you add up adding more problems to it. And I love the way he approached from a military perspective. You've always got to have somebody to step into somebody else's shoes.
Yeah,
You've always got to have somebody who can carry somebody else.
Yeah. And equally, Chris, it's how you get into those shoes.
Yeah.
Because, if I ask the listeners now rhetorically to think about how they were promoted through the career, often people are promoted because they're good at their job. But as soon as that becomes anything supervisory or above, then you get promoted based on what's perceived competence in that previous role.
Yeah.
But now you've just been given a new job, but typically people are not then given the right skills or the new skills for that new role, but they're expected to manage or to cope.
Yeah.
And it's got to be better that, particularly in an aviation environment where safety is critical.
Yeah. I remember working with probably one of the toughest men I ever worked with. And I remember we were at this big meeting and these people kept going on and on and on and on. And this one guy, he just kept going on and he kept saying, I've got 25 years experience. He kept saying it and saying it and saying it. And this guy said, can I ask you a question of clarification? And the guy said, yeah, there was a lot of people listening. And he said, are you sure it's 25 years of experience that you've continually improved? Or is it 1 year's experience that you've managed to survive 25 years with? Everybody smiled. And it was such a, and unless you know what people's competencies are, you never really know what the capabilities of your team are.
Correct. And they're all different. In any team, Chris, there is a variation of competence.
Yeah.
And whatever the management position is of that team needs to understand what that level is.
Yeah.
Because that then dictates the individual support that's necessary to get someone to the critical expectation level that's required for the job. Simple as.
And anybody that's listening, one of the things I would definitely say is worth looking at or contacting you guys about is the way you support the appraisal and the annual feedback and the way it's done in small steps, bi-monthly or quarterly, so that managers don't have to rush around and try and work out what these individuals do. That, I think, was absolutely excellent, Andy.
Yeah, well, just before we step into the appraisal.
And the team compass.
Yeah, so if I take those individually, Chris, so if you're going to talk about appraisal, then first of all, it's then what you're appraising. So the step that we've missed out is once people have self-assessed and the manager or the line manager has validated that as a true or reasonable state of action, then the platform will create a digital action plan focused on the critical gap analysis of that role. From that point forward then, it is then the data measurement that comes in through the ongoing competency tests that is captured day to day, 24/7. So when it now comes to the appraisal that you now mentioned, you now have a truly objective measure as opposed to thinking, believing, or something of that ilk. So it's factual. And then you can have that performance-related discussion with the employee that's meaningful and doesn't come across as sort of a disciplinary or anything else, which often it does.
And then any walk of what we do, 3DM, data-driven decision-making, is always more effective than what you think or what you feel or what you can remember.
And the feedback we've had so far, Chris, if we go down to the lower levels of the management cascade or even below, is the fact that they like it because for the first time for many, they feel supported, Chris. Yeah. So they feel a belonging, which can only add to retention.
No, it's logic, and like most things in life, if you think about them simply, there's a simple solution to them, and it's only us and influencing factors that complicate it. So, good man, lovely. That's that one, Andy. Now we go on to the third step in a few minutes, and as always, enjoyed the little chat with you.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Cheers.